list. Alrighty, good morning, my friends. It is Friday, May 9th, 2025. We're in for our Friday morning public broadcast, and we're going to start today just looking at how the week has unfolded, and then we'll jump into looking at what the charts have to say for this morning. So let's go ahead and I'll just show you here in the overnight session so far. You can see we opened here on the left and went ahead and held that first roadmap level beautifully. Wasn't to the tick, but pretty much less than three points. Holds out, and then we get the push to the high of the overnight session, right to the tick to our next roadmap level. So a really nice low of the overnight session and high of the overnight session, nailing the high to the tick. Also, kind of interesting to note that yesterday, that was right where we came to and held here for quite a long time before we went into that last hour of the day, or right around the last hour of the day. So came right up to it, nailed it to the tick, and got that pullback. And now you can see the bulls are trying to bring us right back up to the top of the range. And give me 1 second here. So that's kind of how the cookie crumbled just in the overnight session. You can also see that this level, this other major roadmap level we had on the chart here, ended up becoming a really nice little scalpable level for quite a while there. Even if you bought it out of the open of the Globex session, you can see before the market closed last night, or yesterday I should say, they did come right to it and bounce. But then in the overnight session there, you can see it held here for a couple scalps, holding the back end of the fast moving average, right? So another textbook situation here, holding the roadmap level again, basically with less than a point of risk, coming up to hold the back end of the FMA. And then we get the pullback to hold that next roadmap level. Again, we're talking 69 down to 65 half, not a huge break. And then we got that pop. So some pretty good stuff happened just in the overnight session, but I want to zoom out and look at how the entire week went so we can see how everything worked out in terms of levels. And like I said, once we go through this review, then we will go ahead and let me do that. It shows my screen. All right, so let's jump out to the hourly here now and just look at how the whole week went. If you recall back to last Friday's broadcast, our public broadcast, we were looking at the week prior to this, and we saw that they came right up to that major roadmap level to the tick. We sold off, held the back end of the next one, and came down, and then basically within a point held that major roadmap level to the bottom end and started to launch out. And I think that's what we were looking at last week. So as we zoom closer to this week now, you can see here's Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday, and this must be Friday of last week. So you can see on Friday there, on Friday there, we did pull back in the overnight session, but pulled back off that roadmap level there, and then came into the open here after the bounce and came up, and then we failed quite literally like 2 or 3 ticks in front of the major roadmap level. So that was the high of Friday. Now let's go into this week. So as we pushed into this week, you can see here, this is now May 5th, going into the Globex session on Sunday, which I guess was the 4th there. And we went ahead and we held the major roadmap level all through the overnight session. And then when the market opened, we pulled back right to it, popped out, and again, that's Monday. We came up and then basically came right to the next major roadmap level and failed out. So Monday's low after the market opened and even the overnight session, right off that major roadmap level, only to come up right to this one and then begin the next sell-off. That brought us to Tuesday here. We're on Tuesday. The market opened here. We held the roadmap level, popped up, got the major high of the morning, or actually going into the afternoon, right off that next major roadmap level, came back, retested that low at the end of the day going into the Globex session. When we went into Globex, they popped right out, came right up to that area, sold off. And then you can see right here, as we sold off going into the end of the day on Wednesday, they came down in the low of the day on Wednesday, was basically to the tick, the major roadmap level. All right, so there is, again, another day nailing the low basically to the tick. And then I believe in the overnight session before the market opened, basically held from there and from here in the Globex session, right? So beautiful kind of parries down the areas, did come right to here to bounce, and then came right down, and then we got the low of the day. And if you were looking for a trade going into the end of the day in that direction of the pop, they pulled back right to that next roadmap level to come up just before the Globex session and fell off there to come down. So there were some great rotations there on Tuesday or on Wednesday. That brought us here into Thursday session where we popped out, and just around the market open or just before the market open, we get the hold right off that major level, holding it to the tick and then peeking into it a couple times only to fail out and get the major low of the day right off the roadmap level, right? So this is after the market opened. They sold off, peaked through it by maybe 4 points, and then pulled back right to it to the tick for the bounce out. And that brought us up to the high of Thursday, yesterday, which was just a couple points through the next major roadmap level. Now, in this case, it did pop through there 6 points. So I'm not arguing that that was a nice, sexy hold there. That was a 6-point break at that point. So it didn't quite work out beautifully on Thursday for the high of the day. But the low of the day, basically nailing it right there. And now as we come into the open here, you can see in the overnight session, we just looked at this on the short time frames. They came down, basically held from here within 3 points. And now we're popping out. And the overnight high to the tick right off of that major roadmap level, which we saw on the short time frames was right where they came. And it was a ledge there for whatever, 20 minutes. And they kept holding and holding and then bounced out and fell through. So again, the level's really working out almost perfectly here throughout the last week. Again, not trying to cherry pick anything here. You can see full frontal what ended up happening. Major high of this move right off there. Major low of the weekly move right to the tick off of there. And all the little rotations inside of here nailing these roadmap levels along the way. So I'm still blown away by the action. And if you were to jump down and actually look at the details here on short time frames, you can still see just how beautifully price is respecting these areas and basically trading to and from these major roadmap levels. So good opportunities, like I said, last night or actually this morning, if you were looking at the screen and you wanted to get in short off of this level, you also did have the second piece of the puzzle, which was a very clear bearish divergence up off that high as we were testing it. So just an hour or two ago, if you got short, you took no risk, or if you got in late, pretty minimal risk off that swing high, and you got yourself, I mean, quite literally here, a 20, 30 point pullback. So great opportunities. That's it for our review from last week. We're going to go ahead and jump up to the higher time frames now and take a look at what they have to say as we come into this morning. So we're going to jump up to the higher time frames and hope all of you have a great weekend out there that are watching on YouTube. We're now going to jump into our planning session for the morning. Hope you have a great day and a great weekend. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and jump up now and take a look at where we're at to finish the week off here. It's been a little while since I've seen you guys, so I hope you're having some good times on your end. I know, Neil, I think you're still on a cruise or just finished a cruise, so hopefully that was really fun. And so let's take a look here and see what's going on. We've got on the weekly, this is kind of the first thing I want to talk about. And if you notice, let me pull it up on my end here. The news report, I did add in now some photos or pictures of the charts. So when you're looking at kind of the major time frame signals and you see bear and you see on the weekly this kind of stuff, now you can just visually come over here and see what we're talking about. And I do think that on the we'll actually just go to the charts for this, but I do want to mention that they are on there. So you can see on the monthly, which we're going to talk about, You can see what's going on here on the weekly right now and see where we are in relation to a lot of the last major price action, the last time that the market has been down here. And then again, zooming into the daily, and now we got the 4-hour on there as well. So you can at least see it's like you're zooming in a little deeper as you look at things. So you can kind of see from the monthly what the gist is, and the weekly and the daily, and then jump down to our hourly chart to see the minute detail. All right, so just wanted to mention that, but let's go ahead and jump up. And the weekly is really something major I want to talk about here, but there is something else as well, jumping up to our monthly chart. And what happened there? Did I just mix those up? On the monthly, it is interesting to note this major hammer to the downside. So with that type of, just to look, again, this is a monthly time frame. Whenever you get these gigantic wicks, either to the downside or the upside, they are a little bit of a clue, right? And right now, this is cluing into the strength of the bulls, right? So we got all of our bearish clues that we were talking about as price was pushing up to all-time highs all through the end of the 2024. We kept anticipating the potential for a major sell-off, right? So everything I'm saying right now, you guys heard for a couple months before we finally got the breakdown, and remember the whole below 50% of the candlestick, and then on the shorter time frames, we got clues way before that, right? So especially on the weekly here, when we actually held below the low of that signal candle there, and then that was the beginning of the sell-off, right? So we had those clues. We got the pullback. We pulled back way more than 1,000 points. We pulled back from 6,200 all the way down to 4,800, give or take. So you do the math there, way more than 1,000 points to the downside. But the bullish recovery was pretty swift, and we're left with this type of price action from the low. So I do kind of think that that is a good little omen for the bulls, despite the fact that we have a lot of clues that this could be the beginning of a bearish market for some time, right? There's always the potential when you have not only the monthly and the weekly, but your quarterly time frame giving you this beautiful, sexy, bearish divergence. There's always potential that this could be the beginning of a multi-year bearish market. It's always potential. Of course, we've got Trump in there right now. We've got tariff wars, and anything's possible. We got the Fed printing more and more money, and this thing could just continue to take off. But that is the potential that is in the charts right now. Again, we've got this big response, right? We had the bearish call from the all-time highs, and then we got this nice bullish response that printed this beautiful monthly candlestick. So this recovery could be active right now, but just be aware that even if this is the beginning of the next major push all the way back to the all-time high, and anyone's guess what's going to happen right there. Again, we could just peak above and then fail right back down. But on the way up here, it's not necessarily going to be a straight line, right? And we know that 50% of this very bullish looking candlestick is right down here at 5302, 5300 area, which is also, interestingly enough, lining up perfectly here with the major swing high from the end of, right at the end of 2021, right? So not only is 50% of this monthly candlestick lining up perfectly with that swing high, but you can also see here, again, this is a monthly time frame, extremely zoomed out, and you can even see how much of a response the bulls get from that little zone right there. So we do have kind of this area around 5,300 that might be where the bears need to pull price before we get the next larger bounce. So that's something to be aware of here from the higher time frames. And it may not be relevant for intraday trading down on short time frames, but from the grand scheme of things, that is something that has been, lighting up my eyes here for at least since this candlestick closed, and I calculated the 50% level. So, right at the end of April, coming into the beginning of May, that stuck out a whole lot. Not only was it just a 50% level, but it was because of the confluence between the price action. So that is something to be aware of. Now, on the weekly, we have some bearish clues up off this major swing high up in May now. And we talked about it for maybe the last couple days, that we do have a pattern starting to line up right here that could be the beginning of a deeper pullback. And deeper, what I mean by deeper here on this time frame is we've got this bullish push out, and this could be the beginning of, a 38.50, 61.8 retracement of that area. And remember, 53.02, which was the 50% on our monthly, lining up with major supply zone or demand zone, and the major swing high from 2021, basically the all-time high back then. That 53.02 is sitting right down here. If I could find it, that's close enough. Sitting right there. And what is that? And I didn't even measure this out, so I don't know what that is, but let's look. That looks to me pretty close to a 50 to 61.8 retracement of the current situation we're in. Look at that. So 53.02, very, very relevant level when you zoom out, is also just almost perfectly a 50% retracement of the current bullish leg that we're in. So I kind of rest my case that 5,300 area is going to be, in my opinion, might become a great target to the downside here if you're short from the weekly highs. Again, that doesn't have to happen. They could just continue to push. But this is the signal I'm starting to get on the weekly. Potential for the bears to pull price back, right? And we already talked about what the target would be to the downside there, right around 53.02. So we do have some confluence there. Now, I do have a couple other things to mention in terms of the bears from this weekly high that we're currently testing, right? If we go down to like our hourly, this is it right up here. We're kind of testing that major swing high and this is where it is on the weekly. So we've got clues for the bears not only on the weekly time frame, but we've got clues for the bears on our 3-day from that swing high, on our daily from that swing high, which is our weekly high, and it's also the previous daily high. And then we have 4-hour bearish signal potential from up there, and we have the hourly bearish signal from up there. So hourly, 4-hour, daily, 3-day, weekly, all cluing in to the potential now for a pullback. Now, I might have to eat my words for the bears here, and this could very well continue to push today. But if we cannot get through the high of yesterday, the previous daily high, and we come back and we hold below 50% of yesterday, which if we come up to the daily here, is that candlestick right there, which by the way, very bearish looking candlestick. If we hold below 50% of yesterday, we can now target down into the low of yesterday and down into lower prices. Okay, 50% of last week, which we all know is very relevant and basically was the low of the week, is down here just below the low of the week. So if we start to pull back this morning and we can hold, and price can hold below 50% of yesterday, that is our first clue for a retest of yesterday's low and potentially a retest of this week's low. So that's kind of the general idea here. Now, the weekly, I said, there's some other things lining up here, and that is the fact that we sold off from the all-time high, came down, held the 61.8 retracement, by the way, of this whole push, right? If you measure this leg, I just love the way the fibs have been working out, just perfect. You know, there's your bullish leg all the way up to the all-time high. They pull back, and where did we bounce? Just a couple, maybe a month or two ago, right off the 61.8 retracement. And now as we're coming up and we're retracing the sell-off, let's go ahead and bring this back up. You can see what we're contending with right now. Sold off, held the 61.8 of that leg. Now we've got the retracement of this bearish push lower, and we're testing right into the 61.8 right now. So that's an additional clue for the bears, because that is a very typical spot that we're going to find resistance. So we've got the retracement right to the 61.8 happening right now as we come into the open, and we're kind of holding it at the moment. We've got a weekly potential bearish signal up there. It's not official, hasn't closed, hasn't confirmed, but we have the potential. And then we have our 3-day, our daily, our 4-hour, and our hourly all printing bearish from that high. So my argument, like I said earlier, just a minute ago, is if the bears can hold below 50% of yesterday, right around there, 56 something, 680 something there, that's our first clue for a pullback to that previous daily low. Doesn't mean it has to happen. We've got plenty of roadmap levels on the way down to the low of yesterday and to the low of the week. So if we do start to sell off, we never want to ignore the fact that any of these potential roadmap levels could be holding, right? So we don't want to forget that. It doesn't mean if we get down through 50% of yesterday, which is right here, even there's a roadmap level very close by, they could bounce out. But even if we hold below there, I'm not saying that there's not potential that they're going to hold one of these roadmap levels here and bounce out. It's always possible, but that is our first clue. First clue is holding, for the bears, holding below 50% of yesterday. Then we can start to target on higher time frames down to the low of yesterday, down to the low of the week, which was our roadmap level to the tick, and then down to 50% of last week, which is very close to the low of this week. And again, not surprising that they came down, and basically the low of the week is just a couple points from 50% of last week, right? This is why we monitor that level, and it ends up becoming a very, very important area in the chart. So that is it. We've got a couple seconds until the market opens. I hope that helps you guys going into the end of the week and potentially set you up for Monday. So have a great day. Have a great weekend. And we'll see you all next Friday, at least for the public broadcast. Have a good one.